So hello everyone, welcome to this week's YouTube tutorial. I am Mike Ingledew. I'm all about making you successful with your integrated product support strategies, whether that's selecting standards, specifications, software, or just developing your skills. Thank you to everybody who is getting in touch and sending in your love for what I'm trying to achieve with this channel. A lot of you seem to like the backdrop that I've put together, and a lot of you are questioning some of the gear that's on there behind me. We're going to be using lots of this as we move through lots of tutorials over the coming weeks. But this week, I want to talk very specifically about skills. And I want to talk about why you need to be developing your technical documentation skills, especially if you are coming at modern technical documentation from a traditional tech docs perspective. And I'm going to talk about why we need to understand things like the mechanics of a modern technical document and why it will only benefit you and your project if you develop some of the skills that are both inferred, implied, and in some of the new S-Series specifications are actually being called out. So this has come about because I field lots of questions from you guys out there, and the questions that I get invariably are because you guys in tech pubs or in similar departments are being asked to quote on items that you may not necessarily fully understand. But we are seeing more now this morphing of all of these domains: training, tech pubs, ILS engineering. All these kind of domains are slowly coming together, and they're all now being more and more integrated in the way that we talk to each other, the way that we share data, we integrate data, we repurpose data. And we're going to have lots more on that over the coming weeks on this channel. And we're going to be looking at some of the specific data flows from specification to specification. But we're seeing guys that are coming from a traditional technical publications area, and they are being asked to quote on items that may not necessarily be in their sweet spot or their current skill sets. So we have to accept that today the technical publication is more than words. And I know that there's an 80s tune that I could burst into right now, but here you can see that this is, we know, and I've talked about this multiple times on this channel, this is what our end user cares about: the words, the illustrations, supporting the product, supporting the platform. But we are certainly now in modern technical publications far more concerned about the mechanics of a technical document, as I call it. So when I talk about the mechanics of a technical document, here I've just extracted something from one of our training courses, and we have a data module in the middle here, and we have to be aware of all of the things that influence and control the way that we work with and how we deploy this piece of technical information. So whether we have to familiarize ourselves with writing rules and principles, structured specification processes, and how do we work with those processes. And of course, we still have to worry about the words and the illustrations and the media and all of these things that still go on the page that we need to get out there. So this is kind of our traditional technical publications emphasis. This is what we generally used to worry about in isolation, but now we have to worry about things like processing languages, transformation languages, presentation languages, and how do we map from specification to specification. We are going to see more, certainly, tutorials on this channel about how do we map things like S1000D to 2000M and 3000L into S1000D and all these kind of things. We're going to start looking at those data flows and how they map and why it's becoming so important. So the mechanics of a technical publication, the dynamics of a technical publication today is different to what we might be originally used to or familiar with. And this is why it becomes confusing for many technical publications guys that have been used to writing technical publications in the traditional sense, and they're now being asked to quote on things like, how much is an S1000D project going to cost us? What do we need in terms of software and technology? What infrastructure do we need? Those kind of questions that we need to be asking ourselves. And I'm going to come on to some of that very, very shortly. But there are reasons why I believe you should be developing your skills. And one of the areas that I like to spend a lot of my time is explaining to people what kind of technology and capability is out there. But some of the reasons for developing your skills is clearly to remain relevant. The market has moved on and continues to move on. The domain and the discipline has moved on and continues to move on. So we know that right now many of us are in organizations where there's lots of restructuring going on. COVID has affected the way that a lot of our organizations operate and we are structured. Some people have been let go, all these kind of things. So we need to make sure that we as technical publications professionals remain current, but also the way that we produce technical documentation today is going to be influenced and impacted by the S-Series specifications. And if you don't know what the S-Series specifications are, don't worry, like, share, subscribe. Over the coming weeks, we're going to break down the S-Series specifications and we're going to talk about how they all communicate to each other and what they are meant to do. But we need to understand the key principles of a modern technical document so we can actually work with our customers, our suppliers, and our vendors. When you are, I won't name any organizations, but I have seen really bad decisions made on projects because there was very little knowledge of technology. So what was quoted to the project or what was suggested to the project was not necessarily the most appropriate way for a project to go. With a little bit of knowledge, with a little bit of understanding, the project would have made a much more informed and a much more cost-effective decision before charging off down a route that cost them, shall we say, a pretty penny. You can communicate with your project stakeholders much more intelligently. If somebody starts throwing around acronyms like XSL, XSLT, XML, XSD, all these kind of things, ADP, you know what they're talking about. You might not know it at the deep domain specialist level, but you have a good idea what they're talking about. You know exactly where it fits inside the mechanics of a technical documentation strategy, and you know where it sits within a technology stack, which is an area that I spend a lot of time explaining to my customers. So we can communicate intelligently, and we can actually act as the voice of reason for our customer in many, many sense. And you have a full and holistic view of the modern technical publication and the mechanics of that modern technical publication. And, you know, I know that a lot of the people I support will understand the mechanics of a traditional technical publication. I know that, and you will understand things like templates and style sheets and those kind of things in a traditional sense. But we need to make sure that we understand the mechanics of a modern technical document. So therefore we have a full and educated perspective when we're asked to do things like quote on contracts, etc. And we can develop modern content in a way that's beneficial to our users and what is actually representative of what the market demands are. I've put two examples there, S1000D applicability and S1000D process data modules. And I've got a slide on the process data module very shortly. This is an area where if you develop your skills, you can, from an educated perspective, propose the adoption of these modern technical documentation approaches and methodologies to your organization, to your customer who may not necessarily have an appreciation of this, and actually become the voice of reason for your customer when it comes to creating more complex structures inside your technical document. And it's important and becomes more important that we understand the data flows and the mapping from one domain to another. We're going to talk a lot over the coming weeks about domains, disciplines, silos, and why it's becoming increasingly important that we understand the data structures that exist in other specifications that we are going to essentially want to start mapping over to our S1000D environment, for example. And we need to be able to talk about these in a way that is palatable to our customer, but also we can brief our supply chain, and our supply chain understands what we're expecting from that data flow and from that data mapping. So we're going to talk about domains, but trust me, people, when I say it can actually be fun. I get a real buzz out of turning technical documents like this into something that is far more modern, far more engaging, and far more useful. I actually get a buzz out of it. I like creating the style sheets and doing the transformations around it. And I get a tremendous amount of joy out of that. You guys could probably enjoy it too. Take a small project and learn style sheet languages, learn about XML, learn about process data modules, and learn about how would you break in applicability models and those kind of things, and start learning about those mechanics of a tech pub. Now, I did mention, and I have mentioned, the process data module and applicability. One of the challenges around modern technical documents is the fact that it really is, in many respects, the programming meets technical documentation, or technical documentation meets programming. And this is where, from my perspective, if you've got style sheet developers and maybe not a deep domain software programmer, but a reasonable programmer on your team, that is only going to benefit you and your technical publications processes and the way that you can work with modern technical information and IT systems, software systems. So make sure that when we talk about things like tech docs is meeting programming, we're still talking way more than words on a page. But if we think about something like an S1000D process data module, which is nothing more than machine readable content, which has got lots of logic statements, but does require programming mindset and being able to understand if, else, and statements. And we can really maximize the benefit of our structured languages and our technical content to our end user. Now, we have been using things like conditional text and all those kind of things, and we still can filter content dynamically in off-the-shelf tools like RoboHelp and Madcap and those things. But this is that kind of capability on a little bit more of a steroid platform. We can really take parameters from an end user, we can interrogate those parameters, and based on those parameters, we can set a user off down a path to ensure that they go in the right direction. We're giving them the right content. And it adds deep functionality, and it's way beyond the simple page-based, paper-based layout content that we have here on my bookshelf that we're streaming from. The reality is that we can really take our content and we can drive users through a process. But the problem with things like the process data module is that many projects, because of the lack of skill, because of the lack of understanding, will avoid it, will stay away from it, and therefore won't benefit from it and won't be able to engage their users in a way that modern technical documents are able to engage our users. But we are seeing now that some of the specifications are now calling out technology. Now, we know that S1000D infers and implies lots of technology, lots of structures, XML, schemas, all these kind of things. But what about some of the sister specifications or the closely related specifications? Well, if we look at something like S2000M, for example, which is available off s2000m.org, You know, this is issue 6.1, which is the as at the time of recording is the latest version of 2000M. I know there's a new version coming out very shortly, but if we just extract a simple paragraph here, in the paragraph itself, it's telling us about software systems, it's talking about language technology, and it's talking about formatting technology. For you to be able to understand the specification and what it's trying to say, you need to have a good understanding of what some of these technologies are and what they mean to our project, and why are they saying that modern software systems will support these technologies. Why is it those specifications are calling for the use of these specifications? So develop your skills in these areas, and it will only deliver rewards to you individually, but also to your organization, to your project, and ultimately you could act as the knowledge base for your customer, which could in turn only develop future revenue opportunities. And you develop that, you become the source of expertise for your customer. So my thoughts on this are quite simple. You need to be developing your skills. If you are not developing your skills in technical documentation, and your opinion of technical documentation, your perspective of technical documentation is still very much this, you are going to be left behind. And you really need to be learning more about the technologies, the capabilities, and because if you really understand some of the languages that are going on behind all of this, you can have intelligent conversations with the software vendors out there who really understand this stuff in the real detail. You can have good conversations with them, understand their architecture. You can understand if that architecture works for you, for your organization, and for your projects. But if you are looking to develop your skills, of course, TDW is here to help. And I'm not going to, make an excuse for making a plug here. We've got some training and events coming up. We're doing a webinar with Kieran Dodd Training. If you haven't seen the latest release of Simplified Technical English, that's been released and is available, Kieran is going to talk about the changes in Simplified Technical English and how it affects you and what are the key takeaways. On the 1st of July, I'm running an online 3-hour session contracting for S1000D. That course is for those of you who are writing contract requirements, or those of you who need to understand contract requirements. Those of you who are in the supply chain, the types of questions you should be asking your customer. And if you are that contracting authority, the kind of things you should be giving to the supply chain. So if you want to join me on that, we are running an S1000D for Technical Authors introduction course on the 12th of July, running for 5 days, couple of hours a day. And we're going to go through all of the main elements and attributes and authoring processes in accordance with S1000D. And if you want to join our Integrated Product Support Conference, 16th, 17th and 18th of November this year, do get in touch. So there's lots of stuff that I'm trying to bring to you free. Some of that is paid for, but a lot of what we're doing is free. But you can come along to any of our webinars that we produce free of charge. But please do get in touch with me with any questions that you might have. What are the skills that you're struggling to develop? What is it you are struggling to understand and work with? It will only pay you dividends if you can get away from only thinking about technical documentation like this and thinking more about the mechanics of a modern technical document. I'm Michael Ingledew. I'm all about making you successful with your integrated product support strategies. Stay tuned, subscribe, like, share, because we're going to be doing more on the S series and how the S series talks to each other. I've introduced S2000M this week. Why? Because we're going to be talking more over the coming weeks about S2000M and how you can use it and benefit from it in your S1000D projects. Stay tuned, everyone. Stay safe. Until next week, see you soon.